If you've spent years avoiding cheese because of your blood sugar, I need to tell you something that may completely change the way you think about food after 60. Because one of the biggest mistakes many adults with type 2 diabetes make happens the moment they open the refrigerator after diagnosis. The cheese disappears first, not the toast, not the sweetened cereal, not the flavored oatmeal packets, not the healthy breakfast bars quietly loaded with processed starches and syrups. The cheese. And here's the strange part. Some adults experience a larger glucose spike from 2 slices of whole wheat toast in the morning than from real aged cheese eaten slowly with dinner. Almost nobody explains that. Because most blood sugar conversations focus only on sugar, while ignoring digestion speed, protein, fat, satiety, and what actually happens metabolically after a meal. Now that probably sounds impossible, because for years, cheese has been blamed for everything. Weight gain, cholesterol, heart problems, high blood sugar, even aging itself. But what surprises many adults over 60 is that certain cheeses may affect blood sugar far less aggressively than many processed breakfast foods people eat every single morning without fear. And today, I'm going to walk you through the 5 types of cheese many diabetics can enjoy more safely, the dangerous cheese products hiding in grocery stores, the biggest cheese mistakes adults over 60 make, and why some healthy low-fat cheese products may quietly be worse than the real thing. And please stay with me until the end, because the final type of cheese on this list surprises almost everyone I speak to, especially adults struggling with nighttime cravings and high morning glucose readings. But first, there's something important most people never hear about blood sugar. Blood sugar isn't only about sugar, it's about speed. How quickly glucose enters the bloodstream, how fast digestion happens, and whether the body feels nourished or overwhelmed. That's where today's conversation becomes very interesting. And before we continue, if you enjoy realistic conversations about blood sugar after 60, without fear, without impossible diets, and without giving up every comfort food you love, consider subscribing to Simple Blood Sugar. Because every week, we talk about foods many adults thought they had to fear forever and what actually matters instead. Now let's start with the first cheese. And honestly, this one surprises people the most. Many adults dismiss cottage cheese immediately. They think of bland diet food, hospital trays, or something people forced themselves to eat in the 1980s. But metabolically, cottage cheese may be one of the most useful foods for adults over 60 trying to stabilize blood sugar and reduce overeating. And the reason starts with protein, because after 60, your metabolism changes. Muscle mass slowly declines, insulin resistance often increases, and many adults unknowingly begin eating more processed carbohydrates simply because they stop feeling satisfied after meals. That's where cottage cheese becomes interesting. A single serving contains a large amount of protein with relatively little blood sugar impact compared to toast, cereal, crackers, or sweetened breakfast foods. And protein changes the entire rhythm of digestion. Think of it this way. Processed carbohydrates are like gasoline thrown onto a fire. The glucose rises quickly, then crashes quickly, but protein behaves differently. More like placing thick logs onto glowing coals. Slower, steadier, longer lasting. In fact, some flavored instant oatmeals marketed as heart-healthy may spike blood sugar faster than plain cottage cheese with berries. That surprises many adults, because the packaging looks healthier. But metabolism responds to ingredients, not marketing. And this is where modern grocery stores become incredibly confusing. Everything says protein, healthy, low fat, diabetic friendly, but the ingredient label tells the real story. If you see corn syrup, rice syrup, processed starches, or added sugars near the top, the product may behave very differently than expected. One of my patients, Kathleen, started eating flavored cottage cheese every morning because she thought it was the safest option for diabetes. But every afternoon, she crashed. Hungry again, craving snacks, constantly searching for something sweet. When she switched to plain cottage cheese with cinnamon and berries, Her cravings dropped dramatically within weeks. Not because cottage cheese is magic, but because her meals finally slowed down enough for her metabolism to keep up. And honestly, that's one of the biggest hidden truths about blood sugar after 60. Sometimes the goal isn't perfect eating. It's simply slowing the metabolic chaos. And slowing digestion matters more than many people realize. Protein-rich foods may stimulate hormones like GLP-1 and PYY, which help the body feel fuller longer. That's one reason some adults naturally snack less after higher protein meals. Not through willpower, through physiology. And honestly, physiology is always stronger than motivation alone. And if you've ever noticed certain breakfasts leave you starving an hour later, while other meals keep you steady all morning, comment the word steady below, because many adults think they lack discipline, when sometimes the real problem is simply how quickly their meals digest. Now the next cheese becomes even more interesting, because millions of people eat it constantly without realizing why it behaves differently inside the body. There's a reason Mediterranean-style eating patterns continue appearing in research connected to longevity and metabolic health. And surprisingly, feta cheese plays a small role in that story. Now, no, feta does not cure diabetes, but what makes it interesting is the context surrounding it. Traditionally, feta wasn't eaten beside ultra-processed snack bars and giant sugary coffee drinks. It was eaten slowly, with vegetables, olive oil, beans, protein, and meals that moved through the body at a calmer pace. That slower eating rhythm matters enormously after 60, because modern eating habits create speed, fast breakfast, fast snacks, fast glucose spikes, fast crashes. Feta naturally interrupts that rhythm. It's salty, strong, rich, which means many people naturally eat less overall while still feeling satisfied. And satisfaction matters more than most adults realize, because blood sugar isn't only about carbohydrates. It's also about appetite regulation. But here's where many adults get misled. Modern grocery stores now sell Mediterranean-style snack packs that are heavily processed, loaded with refined crackers, sweetened dried fruit, processed oils, and hidden starches. So people think they're eating traditionally, while their metabolism experiences something completely different. And honestly, this may be one of the biggest hidden problems in modern nutrition after 60. Foods now look healthier than they really are. One woman once told me, "Doctor, I switched to Mediterranean snack packs because I thought they were healthy. But when we looked closely, she was eating processed crackers, sweetened cranberries, and seed oil-coated snacks every afternoon without realizing it." That's the danger of modern food marketing. Now, another reason feta becomes metabolically interesting is portion control. A small amount delivers strong flavor, which means many adults feel satisfied earlier. That's powerful, because after years of dieting, many adults become emotionally exhausted by restriction. But foods that naturally reduce overeating often feel emotionally sustainable long-term. And sustainable eating patterns matter far more than short bursts of perfection, especially after 60. Now, this next section may upset some people, because not everything labeled cheese behaves like real cheese anymore, especially processed cheese slices. Now, occasionally, eating processed cheese is not the end of the world. But many modern products contain processed oils, fillers, starches, emulsifiers, artificial flavor blends, and ingredients designed more for shelf life than nourishment. And here's the dangerous part. Many adults buy these products because they look convenient, lighter, or healthier. But metabolically, processed foods often behave differently than whole foods, and the body notices that difference. This is why some adults become shocked when continuous glucose monitors reveal something unexpected. Certain low-fat processed snack combinations may spike glucose harder than real cheese eaten with an actual meal. That feels backwards. But the body often responds more aggressively to processed starches than people realize. One patient told me recently, "Doctor, I thought I was doing everything right. I switched to low-fat cheese singles and sugar-free crackers every afternoon. But when we looked closely, The issue wasn't only carbs, it was constant processed snacking. The body never truly rested. Insulin stayed elevated constantly. Cravings never disappeared. Energy kept crashing. And honestly, many adults blame cheese. Energy kept crashing. And honestly, many adults blame cheese while quietly drinking sugar-loaded coffee every single morning without concern. That contradiction surprises people because the real issue often isn't one bad food. It's the constant cycle of ultra-processed eating. This is why reading ingredient labels matters so much after 60. And here's a simple rule many adults find helpful. If the ingredient list feels longer than a pharmacy receipt, the food may be more processed than people realize. Now, the next cheese on this list is one of my personal favorites for a very unexpected reason. It may quietly help reduce overeating without forcing restriction. And if today's video is helping simplify food choices a little, consider subscribing, because every week on Simple Blood Sugar, we talk about realistic ways to enjoy familiar foods after 60, without fear, without guilt, and without feeling like normal life is over. Now, this next cheese is fascinating for a reason almost nobody talks about. Parmesan cheese is fascinating because unlike soft processed snacks, Parmesan is intense, sharp, rich, salty, which means people naturally eat smaller amounts. And that matters enormously for blood sugar because satisfaction changes eating behavior. Many adults continue eating not because they're physically hungry, but because the food never truly satisfied them emotionally or biologically. Parmesan changes that rhythm. A small amount can completely transform a meal, and this creates what I sometimes call the appetite break, not through willpower, through satisfaction. Researchers studying satiety hormones have noticed something fascinating over the years. Highly satisfying foods sometimes reduce overall calorie intake naturally. That's very different from highly processed snack foods designed to keep people eating continuously. And honestly, modern processed foods are often engineered for more cravings, more snacking, more reward signals. Parmesan behaves differently. It encourages slowing down, and slowing down metabolically matters enormously after 60. Now, scientifically, aged Parmesan also contains very little lactose compared to softer cheeses, and many adults digest it surprisingly well. But again, this does not mean unlimited cheese. And it definitely does not mean giant bowls of pasta suddenly become diabetic friendly because Parmesan is added on top. Context still matters. Meals still matter. Movement still matters. But adults who stop fearing every comfort food often create healthier long-term relationships with eating itself. And honestly, that emotional relief alone can reduce enormous stress surrounding food. Now, the final cheese on this list may actually be the most emotionally important of all, especially for adults struggling with nighttime eating. Nighttime eating becomes deeply emotional after 60. Loneliness, stress, fatigue, television, habits, and many adults begin reaching for cookies, ice cream, chips, or processed snacks, not because they're physically hungry, but because they want comfort, not hunger. Comfort. And this may sound surprising, but many adults are not actually addicted to food. They're exhausted, lonely, overstimulated, emotionally depleted, and highly processed nighttime snacks often become emotional sedation more than nourishment. That realization changes the entire conversation around blood sugar, because emotional eating isn't solved through shame. It's solved through awareness. And this is where small portions of real cheese become surprisingly useful for some adults. Because protein and fat may create steadier satisfaction compared to highly processed nighttime snacks. That steadiness matters overnight, especially for adults waking up with high morning glucose readings. Now, this does not mean eating huge amounts before bed. And it absolutely does not replace medical advice. But many adults discover something surprising. When nighttime eating becomes calmer, simpler, and less processed, the next morning often feels different too. Less ravenous, less shaky, less chaotic. And honestly, Food after 60 should not feel like punishment. That may be one of the most damaging ideas modern nutrition ever created. Because the adults who maintain healthy habits longest usually still enjoy eating. They simply learn how to eat with more awareness, not more fear. Because every week we talk about realistic ways to support blood sugar without turning life into endless restriction. And before you go, I'd really love to ask you something. What food were you told to completely avoid after diagnosis that you later discovered may not have been the real problem? Tell me honestly in the comments below. I read every single one, and sometimes your story helps someone else feel hopeful again. Because the adults who thrive into their 70s and 80s usually are not the people with the strictest food rules. They're the people who stop fearing every meal and finally learn the difference between real food and modern processed food pretending to be healthy. And honestly, that realization changes blood sugar far more than most people expect. I'll see you in the next video.